Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And tonight we are talking to Mel Ve, who has undertaken years of groundbreaking research into the origins of man. Tonight she joins us to give a presentation on the earliest known history of man, during which she will reveal many of the early secrets of Homo sapiens. Mel's focus will be on the secrets of the Kalahari, but will extend far beyond that. Mel has her own video platform and is also an author with books published on related topics. Please welcome my guest, Mel Ve. Hi, Mel.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here, Mel. And I hope this is the first of many, many, many live streams in the future.
Well, that would be great. I'm always excited to share the information.
Fantastic. Now, Mel, talking about information, what stirred up your interest in this area?
Right. I won't go into too much detail because the story is an unreal gauntlet of discovery and challenge.
Right.
But I suppose I've always really kind of been a person who questioned everything. You know, as a child, I was a bit of a rebel. I always push the boundaries and question the status quo of, you know, why things are the way they are. And at a certain point, I went through my own personal awakening process. I worked in mainstream media in London and had to, through personal experience, realize how utterly corrupt it was. And decided that, you know, I've got these abilities and these skills, and, you know, I want to do something purposeful with them. So I guess you can call it an awakening process that I went through. And it led me down a very interesting path of personal introspection and discovery. And I guess I've just come to a point where I realized that, you know, there is nothing, no religion, no anything that's higher than truth. So the pursuit of truth has been my kind of focal point for the last 15 years as I set up my own independent media platforms. I've had various platforms under which I've produced various bits of media, books, etc. And the whole intention really was to help people deconfuse themselves from this level of reality, which is really a projected ontological construct to keep us shut down and believing in falsities, which ultimately get us nowhere and just keep us in servitude to a system that doesn't benefit us at all.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I have to say that your videos are fantastic. I mean, I've watched a few of them, and yeah, I mean, the amount of detail and research and their production is fantastic. You're way ahead of me with when it comes to production. I'm I'm very basic, but you know, it is a lovely lovely occupation we both have because we have such similar interests in so many areas. Now,
I wouldn't call it an occupation. It's more a calling than anything else.
exactly.
Not a profitable one, trust me. Profit comes in deception, not in truth.
Exactly. Now, one of the greatest mysteries that has so many different aspects to it and so many different stories and whatever is the origins of man. Do you want to just briefly get into that before we get into this amazing presentation that you're going to be giving us tonight? Over to you.
Sure. Well, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? Like, who are we? Like, we're in a state of flux and flow as a civilization. We've find ourselves at present time in a precarious state. So for those who aren't asking who are we and sort of how do we get here, you're not really asking the right questions, because that is where we have to start with understanding the complete mess that the world is in.
Yes.
And only once you work that out, you can really then from there decide, okay, so we understand the problem, let's try and effect some solutions. You know, you can't find solutions if you don't know what the issues are. So I think that is the most relevant question anyone should be asking, is kind of, you know, who are we and where do we come from and how did we get here?
Exactly. And there are so many things that just cannot be explained by simple logic, like the pyramids and stuff like that. I mean, and Stonehenge. I mean, it's just a big, big mystery. Now, yeah, go ahead, Mel.
Sorry, I would say it's only a mystery if you believe or buy into the official narrative. When you start to do a bit of digging and a bit of research and you open your mind to the possibilities of beyond what we've been taught, these things start to make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Mel, you're going to be taking us through a prepared presentation, which I'm really looking forward to, because I can see you put a huge amount of work into this. So I'm going to hand over to you, and I might chirp up from time to time, but I'm going to hand the stage over to you. And yeah, let's get the show
Recording
on the road.
in progress.
Okay, bear with me 1 second whilst I go to my share screen.
Sure.
Right. So. And sorry, I've just lost the Zoom for a minute. I need to share the screen here. Share screen. Here we go. Sharing and.
Okay, we've got it. Yeah.
We've got it. Brilliant. All right. You can see me, you can hear me.
I can see you and I can hear you, and that's absolutely perfect on the screen.
Superb. Okay, so for those of you who've never come across my work or who don't know me, my name is Mel Ve. That's the titles under which you'll find my various publications and documentaries. And as we've already mentioned, I've always been fascinated by the human story. Who are we? Where do we come from? How do we get here? And where do we go from here? You know, here is, at this time, is precarious. And if we don't know the mistakes or the true history of what has happened to us, we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. So in order to go forward and not end up back in a cycle of destruction, we really need to understand these fundamental questions. And as I've said, this is what we should be all asking ourselves, introspectively, who we are, doing the work to sort of unpack the internal garbage, confuse ourselves from all the toxic information that we've been fed, and really work out what the truth is of our reality and why the truth of our history has been hidden from us. And that's very important, because once you work that all out, you'll understand that there has been an ongoing systematic rewriting of history in accordance with the desired perspective of the dominant culture. And the word history is very interesting because I get into etymology quite a lot in my various works, and I'll touch on it briefly in this presentation. But history is actually two words. It's his story. It's not our story. It's the story of the dominant culture. But there are so many layers and lies and distortion which need to be deciphered in order to get the truth about the human story. As Napoleon Bonaparte once said, history is a set of lies that people have agreed upon. And in fact, history is written by the victors, and indeed it is the losers who get written about, which is interesting because if you think about that, it's actually the people who win the war. So it's the murderers and the psychopaths who get to decide what the children of the future learn about their past.
Yeah.
And if you think about that for a moment, what that actually means is that these people are not going to write about their bloody conquests, as murderous slaughterers. They're going to write about their conquest as glorious and victorious in the name of king, country, and religion. That's how history has been played out. But, there's always two sides to every story. But what we get is the version given to us by the dominant culture, the government-approved version taught to us in history schools. As a seeker of information, my work aims to decipher the deception whilst exploring the lost truth of human history. All of my works are available on my website, which is melve.life. This book, The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, was my first book, and it really gets into the South African aspect of the global conspiracy. It's free to download. I've always made this book free to everybody because I never wanted people to not be able to have this information based on economic circumstances.
Now, Mel, can I just on that book? We've got a forum and on Loving Live TV, and what I'd love to do is to actually open up a page for you where you could put things like this book, and we would then promote them through our daily email out to the huge audience we've got.
I'm touched and honored that you're willing to do that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, I see that Nat, who looks after our forum, is here. So what I'll do is after this live stream I'll put you in touch with Nat, and we'll sort that out.
Wow, thank you. I'm deeply touched that you're willing to share my information, because this is really to help people deconfuse themselves from the nonsense we've been told.
Sure.
One of the key books that I really recommend to people that they check out is my book Spellbreaker. And why it's called Spellbreaker will become clear as we go through my various bodies of work. You'll understand sort of how we are trapped in a spell, an ontological construct. Spellbreaker is the workbook. It's a compendium to my dragonology body of work. And just to let you know, dragonology is actually an entire subject unto its own. Many homeschooled children actually use dragonology as an entire subject of learning, a companion subject to their travels throughout the world. And then the book that is of most relevance to tonight's presentation is The Greatest Discovery. And The Greatest Discovery came out of an aspect of Spellbreaker. I spent a page talking about something in Spellbreaker, which at a later point I decided to look into a bit deeper. And oh boy, was there more to find. So The Greatest Discovery is a book which documents the discovery, and it is my discovery, of the oldest and largest ancient advanced civilization yet to be identified, which is located in the Kalahari Desert of Southern Africa. And of course, the Kalahari Desert also stretches into South Africa, as well as parts of Namibia and Botswana. As I said, everything you can get from my website. Now, here's the controversy about the works that I've gone into. And as a journalist focused on truth, I'm absolutely dedicated to going where the information takes me. And it takes you to some pretty perceivably weird places. But if you're going to be truthful in the journey, you have to go where the evidence takes you, no matter what it might be pointing to.
Sure.
So there's a lot of controversy with what I do. And this work contradicts the official narrative offered by mainstream academia, as it categorically proves that the timeline of human development from a primitive state to one of civilized complex societies is incorrect. mainstream academia will have you believe that the agricultural revolution happened 13,000 years ago. My discoveries prove that there is clearly missing chapters, many missing chapters in our story, the human story, not history. And I've come up against a lot of animosity from certain types, but believe it or not, there's actually a lot of academics. My books are mostly read by archaeologists, anthropologists, historians, who have come to understand that, yeah, history doesn't account for everything that we're told. Education doesn't give us everything we need to know about this subject. So I just would like to say to people who are watching, please, just for a moment, if you invest in any particular belief structures, please just suspend those beliefs for just one moment. Understand that those that are able to see the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses. I hope that you guys can just give me a moment to explain everything before you cast judgment on this information, because when you see where it goes, the evidence is irrefutable. As the Bible says, there is nothing concealed that will not be revealed. And although I'm not a super religious person, the Bible is the book that I read the most and the book that I quote the most in my books, because it actually has a lot of hidden truths that when you understand how to interpret them, they actually evidence pretty much everything that I put forward in my research. So it's not just that it comes from me, it's actually the Holy Book backs up a lot of the stuff that I talk about.
Right.
So I'll give you a brief introduction. Africa is by far one of the most mysterious and misunderstood and misinterpreted places on our planet. And for past several centuries, there's been an ongoing and deliberate misinformation campaign about Africa, the people who inhabit this massive continent, and the true history of this vast land, which stretches further back in time than any other place on Earth. With the exception of the ancient Egyptians, most of Africa and its ancient cultures have largely been relegated to the realms of primitive savagery. We've been taught through mainstream education that pre-colonial Africa lacked civilization, education, and sophistication. Nothing could be further from the truth, for indeed it is in Africa that we find evidence of the oldest and largest advanced civilization to have yet been discovered. Through the research, which ultimately culminates in my book, The Greatest Discovery, I was categorically able to prove that there has been an ancient advanced civilization living in Africa, engaging in large-scale agriculture and religious rituals, going back at least 70,000, possibly 100,000 years before present time. What shall also become evident is that Africa was the location of the legendary advanced lost civilization that became known through history as Atlantis, and that the African continent was once the epicenter of the world and worldwide culture, which had similar beliefs, rituals, and cultural practices and ideologies. For indeed, Africa was and is still the heart of the world. And if you look at a map of the world, you'll see Africa's in the center. You've got America on one side, you've got Asia and the East on the other side. And Africa is distinctly in the middle. It is the heart of the world. And I'd just like to say here that the situation we find ourselves in Africa, with so many people suffering and struggling, it deeply affects me. It's something that I just can't understand, because Africa actually has the capacity to feed the whole planet if the resources were managed correctly, which I will categorically prove again through the course of this presentation. Okay, so feel free to stop me at any time, because from here it goes pretty fast. If you have any questions or you need any clarification on anything.
Sure. And just while you're saying that, Mel, I just want to let people know in the side chat, we've got a few hundred people watching at the moment on the various platforms. Guys, if you've got questions for Mel, just put them in the side chat and I will put those to Mel after the presentation. Back to you, Mel.
Thank you. Great. Yes, I'll answer any questions you guys have. Please do write them down, and as I go through this, because some of the information can be a little bit controversial, and I'm happy to speak to anything you put forward. Okay, so Africa here is depicted in the Munster map from 1554, and you can see that it's not really accurate. The coastline is irregular compared to how we see it on modern day maps. but I will be dealing a lot with ancient maps in this particular presentation.
I love cartography.
Oh yes, it's one of my passions as well. It's very, very interesting. You start to look at things. Mainstream historians and anthropologists have historically been outright dismissive of Africa. In presentations made by the Royal Society in the 19th century, Africa is described as a place of warring tribes, a few scenic spots, but nothing much more of interest or cultural contribution.
You know what,
and this
Mel?
Is completely
it was Dr. Livingstone who called Africa the dark continent.
Really? Wow. I do believe he was a member of the Royal Society.
I believe so, yeah. Back to you.
Anyway, it's completely untrue that, Africa had nothing cultural to contribute, okay? Africa is actually what we term as a theophoric culture. And I will introduce you to some words and nomenclature which I have not made up, which I have kind of invented, if you like, based on existing words. And these words help to categorize certain elements of culture. Theophoric culture is a particular term which I'll go into explain in a moment. But what it refers to is a highly advanced civilization documented in historical accounts, which is evident in the study of cartography, etymology, and historical and mythological accounts. Not the historical record, not to be confused with the historical record. The historical record is highly inaccurate. So I mentioned earlier that the study of dragonology entails a lot of etymology. So let's look at how the word theophoric was established by me so that you can understand when I go through this what I'm referring to when I talk about a theophoric culture. The word ophi is an ancient Greek word meaning serpent or snake. An example of how this root word is used can be found in words such as ophiolatry, which means serpent worship, Ophiuchus, which is the name of a constellation which depicts a man holding a serpent, Ophidiasis, which is a word that refers to poisoning by a snake. So if you die from snake poisoning, on your death certificate, it will state Ophidiasis. It's a technically medical term. Now, the is more common to people. It's a word that people find associated with theology. The is also of ancient Greek origin, and it references a god or cultural deities. An example of the root word the appears in words such as theology, which is a word that references the science of religion and the study of God, usually conducted by a theologian. Theism, a word meaning belief in God or deities. Monotheism, which is a word referencing the belief in one deity or God. Polytheism, a word which references the belief in multiple gods. Atheism, which references a belief that there is no God. So you understand how theophoric, the word theophoric was formed. It's right. A specific cultural reference. When I reference a theophoric culture, I am referencing a culture or an advanced civilization that engaged in ophiolatry, being the worship of serpent gods or deities. Thus, the assimilation of the word and concept that I hear in reference as theophoric is a term that I use to describe an advanced civilization that worship what we commonly reference today as dragons. The process of worship often involves rituals. And I just want to clarify etymology for a moment, because etymology is the study of words and how they form and the meaning and how it has changed throughout history. In fact, the word etymology comes from the Greek word etymos, meaning true or truth. And through an examinations of word and language, we can trace the root of words to their source origins, which often indicate a hidden aspect that can be deciphered through an analysis of hidden symbolic expression. Now, words are symbolic expression. I'll explain to you right here how this works. For example, the word dragon comes from the Greek word drakon, which means great serpent. In fact, this is illustrated in the Revelations chapter 12, verse 9 verse, which says, and the great serpent was cast out. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. By this particular Bible verse, you can see that the great dragon and the serpent are indicated as being the same thing. So when I talk about a dragon or a serpent or serpentine or snake, I'm always referring to the same thing. Dragon and snake are interlinkable, interchangeable. As I said, drakon means great serpent in Greek. Now that we got all of the nomenclature defined, I'm going to take you on a journey through time. Starting with, as I said, the book, The Greatest Discovery, which, as I said, documents the oldest and largest ancient civilization to yet be identified. And an advanced civilization is defined by two simple factors: agriculture and ritual. And we'll get more into that. What differentiates something from being primitive and something as being civilized? A civilized, advanced culture, there is the presence of agriculture and ritual. So defining civilization, let's look at what civilization actually is according to the academic perspective. Historically, a civilization was an organized or advanced culture which is juxtaposed to supposedly more primitive peoples such as nomad hunter-gatherer types. In this broad sense, a civilization contrasts with non-centralized tribal societies, what we would refer to as primitive. I don't like those terms, but I didn't choose them. The earliest
Hi, Mel, I've lost your connection.
Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, Mel. Can you just go back to the start where you just said, I don't like that, then we lost you with the internet.
Sure.
Yeah.
No worries. As I said, defining civilization is interesting because civilization is juxtaposed and contrast with non-centralized tribal societies, which we often refer to as primitive, which is not a term that I like, but that's what academia has given us. The earliest emergence of civilization is generally associated with the appearance of a governing elite, the practice of slavery, the obsession with gold, and the worship of serpent deities or dragons. This is very important. You cannot separate those things. A governance, slavery, the obsession with gold, and the worship of serpent deities or dragons. Those three things can be traced as far back as you can trace civilized man. A civilization is a complex society characterized by symbolic communication forms such as art, language, writing, and ritual practices. Civilizations are intimately associated with and often defined by other social, political, and economic characteristics, such as expansionism, centralization of power, the domestication of humans and other organisms such as plants and animals, specialization of labor, slavery, religions, culturally ingrained ideologies of progress, supremacism, monumental architecture such as temples of worship, acts of sacrifice such as taxation, but most importantly, the practice of ritual and societal dependence on agriculture to feed said society. So again, talking about what defines a civilization, definitely the practice of agriculture.
Right.
Okay, so the difference between a primitive and advanced culture, let's just have a look at that. When examining the remains of long-lost cultures, be it ruins, artifacts, or skeletal remains, there are two key factors that anthropologists and archaeologists use in order to identify whether they are looking at a so-called primitive or an advanced culture. Evidence of agriculture and ritual activity are the two key factors thought to show the existence of an advanced culture. To more primitive people, such as nomadic hunter-gatherer types, practices such as agriculture and ritual are not commonly found for the reasons that the endeavors of agriculture and ritual are effortful and costly on time and resources. Agriculture and ritual require complex communication organization that's taking away from the daily pursuit of hunting and gathering, which were deemed necessary for survival. To so-called primitive groups of people, much of the effort within a day-to-day activity would be focused on acquiring food and materials for survival, very much like animals. However, when a group of people are classified as advanced, this is usually due to the appearance of ritual and or agriculture. Rituals are usually led by a community leader, such as a chieftain, priest, oracle, shaman, magician, or such like, and often require a special place for these rituals, such as a temple, henges, churches. And thus, in order for ritual activity to have been part of a society, that society must have been engaging in agriculture in order to feed the priesthood and the builders of the temple, which would further indicate complex societal structures which would typify so-called advanced cultures. This is where we find the appearance of ritual and agriculture, which necessitate organized systems of resource gathering.
Right.
So let's look at what is the basic needs of people, okay? Obviously, when you start to organize the basic needs into organized systems of resource gathering, that is when you start to have civilization, right? So advanced culture. For example, water into organized systems would be canals or channels, aqueducts, pipes, storage such as dams or tanks. Food, obviously, farming, plants, and the rearing of animals. Shelter, the building of houses. It's not, nomadic pastoralists kind of moved from one place to the other. They moved where they could get food. Now we have settlements where permanent housing structures and temples and community buildings are being built. And the protection from the elements, which is things like, was one of the things we absolutely need, such as clothing, blankets, and bedding. These systems of organization would require specialization of labor, such as slavery, and systems of communication, such as writing and record keeping. And that's, again, an indication as to what starts to indicate advanced civilization.
Right.
So let's define agriculture. The science or practice of farming, including cultivation of soil for the growing of crops and the rearing of animals to provide food, wool, or other products. Agriculture is inextricably linked to the seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, so the movement of the sun, and weather conditions, which of course, again, is linked to the movement of the sun, and most importantly, fertility. And this is where we start to get into how agriculture and ritual are linked. Okay. Now, this starts to go a little left field for some people, but bear with me because I'm going to jump straight in with the controversial stuff now to show you exactly where I'm going with this. Because animals don't consciously engage in practices of ritual agriculture. And human beings before so-called godly intervention, where we were given certain gifts and knowledge, also didn't engage in agricultural ritual. We were nomadic and we kind of hunted and gathered. It is believed by ancient alien researchers that humanity was gifted the knowledge of the sun, constellations, geometry, and agriculture by an advanced non-human race that had scaly serpent or fish-like appearance. They were also referenced in many mythologies as creator gods. They created mankind as we know them today, the advanced civilizations that we know today. The Greek historian Berosus says that in the area bordering on Babylon appeared a frightening monster named Oannes. It had the whole body of a fish, but underneath, attached to it, the head of a fish, there was a human head, and joined to the tail were feet like those of a man, and it had a human voice. Its form has been preserved in various sculptures to this day, and I'll get into that at the end of this presentation as well. These sculptures appear all over the world, and they're all so similar that you can't deny that there must be some truth to this, because these unconnected sources are presenting very similar imagery. You can see from three different locations in the world here, very similar imagery, okay? Berosus says that this monster spent its day with men, never eating anything, but teaching men the skills necessary for writing and for doing mathematics and all sorts of knowledge, such as how to build cities, found temples, and make laws. It taught men how to determine borders and divide land, also to plant seeds and then to harvest them in order to get fruits and vegetables. In short, it taught men all those things conducive to a settled and civilized life. So there was an intervention somewhere, and you start to see this kind of come through in the images of supposed mythological gods. This is the Greek goddess Persephone, and you'll see the serpents here. Again, we hit heavily on the serpent symbolism, right, because we've already spoken about that a lot. And in her hand, she's holding sheaves of wheat. Okay.
Yeah.
And then every ancient culture, there exist gods whose tutelary speciality was agriculture. Doesn't matter which one, Greek, Canaanite, Japanese, Hindu, Javanese, Norse, Mayan, Egyptian, Zulu, Yoruba, Aztec, Native American, Slavic, Mesopotamian, Celtic, Roman. They all had agrarian gods. And all of these agrarian gods were honored with rituals and votive offerings. A votive offering is a devotional offering, such as a sacrifice. So let's have a look at the mainstream academia view on ritual. The concept of ritual has baffled mainstream anthropologists across the world. In mainstream academia, there is no widely agreed upon explanation as to why people of seemingly unrelated cultures existing in different parts of the world engage in or perform rituals. The field of ritual study has seen numerous conflicting definitions, and thus defining and understanding the practical purpose of ritual is often a confusing matter. That is until you grasp the basic concepts that I share here, which I break down into very simple noticeable forms, that you can identify the basic elements which are present in most rituals in one form or another, depending on the chosen style of representation of that particular culture. Rituals can be found in all known human civilizations and societies, and ritual is a distinctly human endeavor, as animals don't engage in rituals, nor do they even have an understanding of the concept. Ritual is usually an effortful endeavor and sits outside the realms of that which is deemed practical, functional, or which serves our basic physiological needs, such as keeping warm or having hydration or food. In fact, many rituals seem to have no purpose at all, often appearing to the outside or onlooker to be non-contiguous, illogical, irrational, impractical, or unnecessary even. Ritual is an excessive, effortful, often costly endeavor, often with the ultimate cost of ritual counted in human or animal life, possessions, time, and resources.
Now, Mel, just on that point, did you see the opening of the Commonwealth Games?
No, I did not, but they normally are very rigorous.
They had a ritual type opening where they had this engineered bull, which was about 20 feet high. And at the very start, they referred to the bull coming into an area for Baal or Birmingham.
Baal.
Yeah, Baal, which is Satan. It's quite extraordinary, and it's gone viral on the internet. But yeah, and that was a ritual at the start of the Commonwealth Games.
What you need to understand about all games is all games are rituals. The original rituals was actually think of the original first ball games that were performed by the Mayans. The losing captain was decapitated.
Oh, no.
It was a ritual. The ball is actually a representation of the sun. Yeah, the ball is a representation of the sun, and the idea is to keep the ball moving, because if the ball should stop moving, it's bad luck, because it means that the sun will stop moving. So the idea was to keep the ball moving. They used to pass these balls through sort of hoops in ancient Mayan and Aztec cultures, and it was indeed a ritual, absolutely a ritual. Same with the Olympic Games, which is the first sort of games of those kind that in history that we know of. They were actually a religious ritual to the god Zeus. So all games are rituals. No wonder they would have a ritual to open the games.
Yeah. It was just interesting, though.
Yeah, you'll notice that with every single games or Olympics, they have a massive opening ceremony, which is actually a ritual. And you can pick up all the elements that I speak of in those rituals, all the symbolism, all there if you know what to look for.
Fascinating. Okay, back to you.
So defining ritual. There is a direct correlation and connection between the following three factors. The practice of ritual often in tandem with solar cycles, the worship of gods, serpent deities, dragons, and the appearance of organized agricultural civilization and societies. Ritual is often defined and understood to be a sequence of activities involving gestures, actions, and words performed in a specific or significant time, in a sequestered place, and performed according to a set sequence. Ritual often forms the central cultural axis around which many societies have been formed. Rituals are characterized, not necessarily defined, by traditionalism, formalism, or rule governance, as well as performance. Ritual commonly invokes the use of sacred symbolism, sacred artifacts, and votive offerings, which often includes sacrifice.
Right.
So let's look at time and ritual, okay? Because rituals happen at a specific time, always, right? A specific time for a specific place for a specific reason. Ritual happens at a sequestered place. Ritual is performed according to a set sequence. Ritual takes place at a specific or significant time. Time is defined by the movement of the sun, as I've illustrated here with a sundial. You know, the first watches were made like this. Agriculture is seasonal, hence why it became significant or necessary to mark the movements of the sun for seasonal agriculture. For example, it's important to know when spring or planting season happens for agricultural production. So time is divided into solar years. The years are divided into months. The months are divided into days. Days are divided into hours. Hours are divided into minutes. Minutes are divided into seconds. And this is all divisible by 3. And I call 3 the God code. If you ever watched any of Nikola Tesla's stuff or researched Nikola Tesla, he will tell you, if you understand the significance of the 369, you will uncover the secrets of the universe. And he was not joking. The God code is hidden in the number 3.
You know, I find that guy, Nikola Tesla, to be one of the most incredibly smart people who has ever walked the earth.
Absolutely. And to think we didn't even know his name when we were in school. He was never taught.
Yeah.
Nothing. We knew nothing about him. I had to learn about him through working with the breakthrough energy movement.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at fertility rituals for a moment, because this is the kind of ritual that is normally associated with agriculture. Okay, rituals are commonly led by a community leader, such as a chieftain or a priest or an oracle. And in order for rituals activity to have been part of society, that society must have been engaging in agriculture in order to feed the priesthood and builders of temples, which we've already discussed. Rituals first start as part of a cyclical agricultural practices to mark the start of spring, starting with fertility rituals and ending the agricultural cycle with harvest rituals. Fertility rites are religious rituals that are intended to stimulate reproduction in humans or in the natural world. Such rites might involve the sacrifice of a primal animal, which must be sacrificed in the cause of fertility or even creation. This is something you come across quite commonly in Africa, these rites and rituals. Now, just to give you an example of modern day agrarian rituals, because they're somewhat more sanitized these days, okay, there are many rituals which have evolved all over the world, all of which have differing acts and traditions. The most common rituals associated with the annual solar cycle, the agricultural cycle, is, of course, Easter, which has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Nowhere in the story of Jesus and Easter do you find the appearance of bunnies and Easter eggs. Okay, Easter comes from the word Ishtar or Ustara, which are pre-Christian deities. It's a pagan tradition which has been Christianized. And of course, Halloween or Samhain, which celebrates autumn and harvest. And just to give you an idea of the symbols associated with these two holidays. Okay, so bunny rabbits and eggs are associated with Easter. As I said, you don't find anything about bunny rabbits or eggs in the Bible, because this is obviously a symbol that's associated with springtime and fertility, right? Eggs are always a symbol of fertility. And of course, Halloween is associated with symbols such as the pumpkin, because it's in fact a harvest time ritual. So how far into the past can we trace theosophic or agricultural cultures that engaged in ritual? And this is where it gets really interesting, because there's no mainstream historians or anthropologists that'll get on board with what I'm about to tell you. Numerous of them have bought my books, but if you had to ask them on the record, they would never go there because they know their careers would be on the line. But the evidence is irrefutable. It is in fact carved in stone. This is Rhino Cave in Sodilo Hills, Botswana, Southern Africa. This is a 70,000-year-old ritual site, wow. Meaning that this is the site of what once was an advanced culture that engaged in ritual. And I'll show you more of how we've gone on to prove that, okay?
Right.
Here we go. It shows you, this is an image I took off a television series, and it was lovely outlines. I couldn't resist. It showed you where all these little marks here show you where they've been carved what looks to be like scales. It's definitely been worked. The stone isn't just a naturally occurring formation. It's been worked to look like a stone carving of a serpent, a giant serpent in a particular cave in Cedillo Hills. Now, again, just to quote you another Revelations verse, not the same one as before, but again, it reminds us that he sees the dragon, that ancient serpent. All right, so the dragon and the serpent are the same thing.
Right.
So this is what these two items look like during the day and during the night. And the reason I wanted to give you a picture of the stone serpent at night is because when it's lit by candlelight, it actually, the scales give it an illusion of being of a little bit of movement. So it kind of comes to life. Because as you know, as the flames dance, so the shadows move.
Sure.
And it actually looks like it's moving slightly. And that's not the only place in the world where you find serpent carvings that seem to move with the movement of light. They have that at Titwanika in Mexico on the serpent, Great Serpent Pyramid.
Mm.
This is the lovely, wonderful lady, Sheila Coulson. She's a dear friend. She is the Associate Professor of Archaeology. If any of you watched that piece, Secrets of the Kalahari, you'll see that I have interviewed her and I've worked with her extensively to gather all of her data on this particular area in Cedillo Hills, this rhino cave where the stone serpent is. Because she was the lady, along with her team, I think it was in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, I could be corrected, that went and excavated Rhino Cave in Cedillo Hills. And she was the one who dated the site to be at least 70,000 years old. She admits that her discoveries can be nothing other than an indication of ritual behavior, thus making it the oldest ritual site to be discovered. What do we find in the oldest ritual site? The icon of a serpent, okay? Again, you're welcome to go check out the full interview of Professor Coulson and myself. It's on my website, melve.life/dragonology. This is what she found. Under the belly, she dug down a 1 meter pit, and she said it was like digging in cake flour. It was such fine dust, which had over 70,000 years built up. So dust coming in and layering in to build up over 1 meter of dust, okay? Fine dust. You must imagine how old it is, but just over 1 meter down, what they found were these carved stone points, which were excavated from beneath the stone serpent.
They're beautiful.
And they are incredible. You'll notice they're all of different, not local stones. Some of these stones come from thousands of kilometers away.
Wow.
Okay. So these, and she says to find in a pit that size, a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter down pit, to find in that area, she would maybe find 2, 3, she says, let's be generous, maybe 7 or 10. But what they found were 88 perfectly formed stone points.
Wow.
And she said that is unprecedented. It was either be a stone point graveyard where they were, that's the only way you found that many bodies clustered together, as if it's, bodies that were deliberately buried there. That's how she referenced it. Or they were deliberately put there for a specific reason. Now, ritual, always remember what I said, specific reasons behind things.
Now, Mel, that little scale, are those centimeters, or what's the scale at the bottom?
Centimeter, indeed. This is 1 centimeter. So it gives you an idea of how big these things were.
So that's about 4 centimeters long by about 3 centimeters wide.
They're all different sizes, but they're perfectly carved. And you can see like where they've been chipped, the fascias. Sheila Coulson actually did her thesis. She's got a dissertation out on stone points. So she's an expert in stone points. She's one of the world's foremost experts in stone points. So for her to give this analysis gives a lot of credibility to what she's saying. Okay. And like I said, there's even remnants of the manufacture of these stone points. Like a piece of material was brought to the cave, they were manufactured, and the remains of the leftover cast-off chips were often left there and were also found in this pit. So someone would come from far away, they would have brought a very unique or unusual, beautiful piece of stone. They would have fashioned it into the point, okay, and then they did one of 3 things with the stone point. They either left it there, or they burnt it, or they smashed it. Okay, so that's what they did. Why go to all the effort of bringing something from thousands of miles away to then just discard it?
Yeah.
So I did ask Sheila Coulson. I said, well, did you find any remains there? Because this looks like it could have been something that was used, you know, as a ritual to slice throats or kill animals with, because that's what you associate stone points with. You know, the Khoi San would make little points to go hunting with, for example. That's what these stone things are normally fashioned for.
Yeah.
But these are, it's very effortful to create these and then just to leave them behind, such something that was brought from so far away.
Absolutely.
There must be a reason for it. Now, the only reason I can think of is if you've used these for an act of sacrifice, you wouldn't necessarily want to be carrying it around with you because that would be bad juju, you know.
Yeah.
You'd kind of leave it with whatever's been sacrificed. So they were specifically crafted, I believe, for the act of sacrifice, but that cannot necessarily be proven because in a 70,000-year-old site, in an environment like the Kalahari, you know, human and organic or animal remains don't last very long. You know, if you've ever been on a safari, you know, you'll see a kill one day and you come back 6 days later and there's not a sign of the carcass because it's been eaten by the vultures and you know, the dogs and whatever else have come and eaten it. So these things also, over 70,000 years, whatever minuscule little bones might have been left would have disintegrated. There wouldn't be any organic remains left. But stone lasts, okay? Stone lasts. So this is what is left of this ritual site. 88 perfectly formed stone points, which came from a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter pit below the serpent's belly, which means that that whole floor area that's beneath the serpent was a lot lower, meaning that people were looking up at the serpent,
Right.
Okay, from where they were. So it was a focal point.
Mel, you say the pit was 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Was that an approximation or was it pretty close to exactly?
That's exactly what she told me. She said that's the size of the pit that they dug. And
Wow.
This is what they found in their pit was at the bottom of the 1 meter pit was 88 perfectly formed stone points. And some of the stone comes from thousands of kilometers away.
Wow. Okay.
It's not native to the area. None of the stone is native to the area.
Okay.
So you think about this. You've had people coming to this particular cave where there's a stone serpent with beautiful pieces of stone, which they've fashioned into points. And they wouldn't just do that for no reason. There's a specific purpose to the point. Okay, it's to be used for something. So my educated guess would be some kind of sacrificial ritual, either human or animal. And then they discard the points because after you've, you know, killed your child and sacrificed to the serpent, you don't really want to be carrying that point around with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, got a bad energy attached to it. So that's why that would then be left there. I don't see the point of leaving something like that there that's been so effortful to collect and create if it wasn't part of a sacrifice.
Right.
So let's look a little bit about Sedilo Hills now that we've discussed the Serpent Cave and what was discovered in it. Okay. Sedilo Hills is known as the Mountain of the Gods. And this isn't just a pretty marketing tag. This has real significance to it. Okay. Sedilo Hills is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with over 4,000 examples of rock art. It's the only World Heritage Site in Botswana, the first one, I should say, that was allocated as with World Heritage status. Sedilo Hills is located in the northwest corner of Botswana, which is, of course, surrounded by Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. It's a landlocked country. Sedilo Hills are the only hills for hundreds of kilometers in any direction. And it's located in the middle of the Kalahari Desert. If you climb the hills, you'll see for yourself that terrain is flat, 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 flat. There's nothing else around, which makes it a natural gathering point for, you know, the Khoi San, the nomadic Khoi San who lived in the desert. That would be a natural gathering point because that's where they'd all know to gather. Because there is nothing else around.
We've got a similar thing in Australia with Uluru, which is that huge rock where the Aboriginals used to gather.
And there's a lot of similarity between Khoi San mythology and Aboriginal mythology, which I can get into in another presentation. But there is much commonality because what is true for one culture, ancient culture, is exactly true for another ancient culture.
Isn't that amazing?
The Aboriginals talk about the rainbow serpent was the creator of humanity. Rainbow snake, they call it. So the serpent creator deity turns up in every ancient mythology across the world.
Yeah.
Right, just a few pictures here so you can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at, different perspectives of Cedillo Hills. You can see it's very, very flat. Now, when you get above Cedillo Hills, have a look. Beg your pardon. When you get above Cedillo Hills, I was like, okay, so my discovery wasn't finding the serpent cave. That was found by Sheila Coulson. And I interviewed her and got all of her data. And then I thought, well, this is an interesting place. Let's look at what's around it. And hello, Google Earth. So we went onto Google Earth and we had a little look. We started to notice there's a few really unusual things which appear in the landscape around Cedillo Hills. So this is your Cedillo Hills. They're divided into, I think it's the mother, father, grandfather, or child's hill. I might be off for the names, but these little peaks all have different names. And I started to notice these straight lines which seem to run along here. They seem to be parallel with each other on the ground. It's like, well, what on earth are those? And they're actually irrigation canals. Okay. And if you start to measure them, which I did, I used Google Earth to measure them. These are agricultural strips with irrigation canals in between them. And then they're not irrigation canals anymore because this is the desert, right?
Yeah.
So this is a piece of land that was terraformed for agriculture, for aquaculture and agriculture. And I'll show you how this will work. Now, the agricultural strips are approximately 1.5 kilometers wide. At certain points, I've got 1.7, 1.8, just depending on how you measure with Google Earth. The irrigation canals went anything from 250 meters wide to half a kilometer wide. So these irrigation canals. Now, that is no small feat to build an irrigation canal that wide.
How long are they?
Very long. The entire area, square kilometer wise, is over 300 square kilometers worth of irrigation canals. Just to give you an idea, the state of Arizona is 295,000 square kilometers. Okay, wow. So this area is bigger than the state of Arizona, which is the 6th biggest state in America.
Okay.
So it's a massive portion of land. I'll show you as we get higher just how much of these land you see, and then you just can't miss them.
Yeah.
This is the Okavango Panhandle, which ends up in the Delta. Okay.
And so they have a water source right next to where they have the channels.
And the channels, if you start to look, actually come out the other side at the same sloping angle. So this whole area was not like this at one point. It was all agriculture and aquaculture canals.
Wow.
Which kind of, the Okavango River, it sort of dumps into this marshy swamp, which floods once a year, but it just kind of ends in a landlocked area. It doesn't flow into the ocean. And what they did was they went, okay, well, this is a wonderful water source hitting us smack in the middle of Africa, and we're going to use it, whoever they were. We're going to take this and we're going to turn it into a terraformed landscape. And I lived in Holland for almost 10 years, and I lived in The Hague when they were building canals in the block down from mine, and it took them 6 months just to get like a few hundred meters of canals built. Okay, it was a hell of a thing watching this construction go on. It was cranes bringing in heavy cement blocks to reinforce the canal walls. It was massive industrial diggers scooping out the soil. It was one hell of a thing to do. Now, I want to ask you, how on earth this ancient terrain was built? Because to have canals that are half a kilometer wide and stretch on for hundreds of kilometers in perfectly straight parallel lines, you have to be working with some form of machinery or advanced technology.
Yeah.
End of story. There's no other way you can account for this.
No, if that was all under, you had crops on that, how many people could you feed? It must have been a huge population.
Absolutely. This is covering 300,000 square kilometers with the capacity to create food for a population of 6 billion people. Now, you take an acre of well-farmed land, you can create food for 90 to 100 people. So if you then do the mathematics, you come out at a population of 6 billion people, meaning that at a certain point, there could have been up to 6 billion people on Earth before our current iteration of civilization. Why would they go to all that effort to create such massive landscapes for agriculture if there wasn't the need for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Bearing in mind how much effort it would take to create this kind of terraformed landscape. And I like the term terraform because the Bible talks about God created the earth, who created the heavens and the seas and the earth and the trees and all of that. My belief and the ancient alien theory is that that is really the story of how an advanced race came to earth and terraformed the earth. And here we've got the evidence of it.
Right.
Okay. So getting a bit higher up, let's go high.
Oh, you can see the lines again. Yeah. Wow.
Yes, the lines, you can see them here. This is from a NASA satellite image from the International Space Station. Here, the red circle is where Sedilo Hills is. And I do apologize if you hear some mowing. My little fur buddies have come to join me. I'm talking lots. But this is the circle. This is where Sedilo Hills is. And as you can see, it's completely surrounded by these lines. And they all go at the same sort of angle. You can clearly see it. It's all going at a very specific angle. And it's all about gaining water from the Okavango River, which ends up here in the delta. And this delta probably didn't exist back then, or it may have existed and they decided to terraform and take the water that just dumps into the swamp and turn it into aquaculture and agricultural plains. Now, in order to create these aquaculture and agricultural strips, the land has to be very flat. You're not able to go the straight lines over mountains and hills. Okay, you would see deviations and whatnot. It's not that easy to do. This is a very flat landscape. As we've already said, if you go on the top of Sedilo Hills for hundreds of kilometers around, it's flat, 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 flat. This is a NASA satellite image. This short focal length astronaut photograph shows the Okavango Delta swampland, and it's known as the Jewel of the Kalahari. It's an enormous pristine wetland, which miraculously appears in the desert where surface water is typically non-existent. In fact, the Kalahari Desert supports more life than any other desert because it wasn't always a desert. You understand? This was once a very lush part of Africa that supported huge amounts of life and produced massive amounts of food. The water comes from the Okavango River, which rises in the high rainfall zone of southern Angola, hundreds of kilometers northwest. So that's where the water comes from. And I want you to notice here what NASA, NASA is another organization I don't want to get into, but they're not entirely honest. They mark this as linear dunes. I went and looked at what linear dunes look like. Linear dunes don't form in straight lines. So this is misleading. It's not linear dunes.
Right.
This is how they've justified. Oh, what are these straight lines on the earth? Linear dunes. They're not linear dunes. Okay. This landscape is flat. Right. It's no dunes there.
Okay.
And you can see here how flat this landscape is. And if you're able to look a little bit, you can sort of start to see a little bit of lines going in directions, okay?
You know what I find fascinating, and you've really nailed it there, Mel, is that when you go to Google Earth and you look down at places, you can see structures and things that you cannot see on the ground. And there's a classic example of that. The small town of Pilgrim's Rest, which is up in near the Kruger National Park. If you zoom into the actual town itself, zoom right in to the town of Pilgrim's Rest itself on Google Maps, and look on the other side of the river, you will see a structure, which is actually the old fort that was built by the original Boers back in the 1870s when they were under attack by the local African population. And you cannot see it when you're walking on that hill, but you can see it perfectly when you look at it from Google Maps. It's a fascinating example of how you can unpack history by using aerial photography. Sorry, back to you.
No worries. I agree with you completely. I spent hours, last weeks of my life looking at Google Earth, my poor computer, because it really heats up and I can hear it churning when I'm using Google Earth. But you won't believe the stuff I've found. In fact, if I am welcome to come back and show you some more, I'd like to show you Atlantis and where it is. It's in Africa.
Well, there's that there's that other strip which is right on the west coast of South America, where if you go on Google again and you look down, I think it's in Chile, but it's one of those countries where there are these huge sculptures that can only be seen from space. And
yeah, that you're talking about the Nazca lines.
yes, yeah,
yes, it's fascinating.
absolutely amazing. And
they
they're
were
old.
designed.
They're old.
They were designed to be seen from the sky, which
Yes.
makes you think, us as such earthbound people, why would we create these things? And were they created for us or something else?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the ancient astronaut theory, or ancient alien theory, which I'm a big proponent of, because I think the evidence is everywhere to back up this theory. And in fact, it's not even fringe pseudoscience anymore. They've got a whole series on the History Channel called Ancient Aliens now, and they explore this information. At one point, this was relegated to the realms of semi-dismissive conspiracy, stuff, but it's becoming more accepted now. These ideas are becoming more mainstream.
The Department of Defense in the US have now provided information to the public which shows things they have not been able to explain, whizzing around fighter jets and things like that. I mean, so this is coming from official sources. Back to you.
Exactly. Okay, so just another view here of Sedilo Hills again in the distance, and you can see how flat it is all around it. And this is interesting because the Sumerian word Eden means plain. And the word plain actually refers to a large flat area of land. If you look at the actual definition of what a plain is, I thought that was fascinating because this is a large flat area of
Garden
land.
of Eden.
Garden of Eden. And in the center of it, the serpent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you with me?
The symbolism,
right?
Absolutely.
It's all there. Okay, so just for those who don't know the Okavango, and for people in South Africa or around, please do yourselves a favor and book yourself a nice little safari or boat tour down the Okavango and just have a look at the beauty of this area, because it is truly an amazing part of the world.
It is incredible. Yeah.
And there's this, when you understand the mystery that surrounds it, makes it that much more magical. If you can, try and get a plane, charter a plane or a helicopter to get you to fly over so you can see the lines for yourself. You are able to see them from a helicopter. But just another perspective, of course, it winds and twists. But what is interesting to notice in this picture here is you start to see these line formations in the ground here. And you notice like this probably was a canal at one stage. And there's part of what might have been part of the canal at some stage. Over time, things have changed. We'll get into how that has happened.
That looks like a cartoon character with the arms and the head and the eye.
It does. Yeah, it does. With a cyclops one eye or something. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at Sedilo Hills, because this is where it gets interesting. Okay,
right.
So Sedilo Hills is located here, the northwest corner of the Kalahari Desert. Here's the Okavango River, and of course, here's where it splits into the Panhandle and the Delta. Okay,
right.
So here it's in the corner here, and I've just given two different maps. So here is Botswana, and here's a close-up of Botswana, and that's where Sedilo Hills is. Okay, so remember where it is. It's in the north western corner, and we're going to go to here. So here is where it is, okay, which technically means that on this ancient 1542 map, it's a Portuguese map, it's marked here, right? Look at the comparison. Do you not think that is referencing the same place?
And it looks like a serpent.
Yeah, what do you think? That's a serpent, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a serpent, and here's a dragon, a red dragon with wings.
Who was the author of that map?
To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure who the author was. I was sent this map by someone who's been following my work for over a decade.
Wow.
This was an absolute find. I even got it interpreted. Forgive me, this is actually screenshots from my upcoming book, which I've borrowed for the sake of this presentation.
Sure.
So no one has seen this information before. This is brand new putting out there. So take note. Okay, so I want you to notice what's interesting to notice. 1542, which is 110 years before Jan van Riebeeck landed at the Cape on the behest of the Dutch East India Company. Okay, so back then the Portuguese knew about this place, right? They knew about this place. They knew that it had something to do with serpents. Okay, it's indicated on the map. And if you read, this is old Portuguese, it's a mixture of Portuguese and Latin. I had this interpreted. It said that it says the inscription says that a basilisk lives within the mountains, and a basilisk is just another word for a serpent. Okay, I'll get into the etymology of basilisk in a moment. Dutch settlers only land on the region 110 years. Forgive me, this is a typo. The book is still in first phase, but it's 110 years before the Dutch East India Company landed at the Cape. So the Portuguese knew about this 110 years before official settlement of this area. So, which indicates that the Sodilo Hills was known about by Portuguese sailors prior to the colonization and exploration of the region, and that it had something to do with the serpent, which is quite ironic, because what Sheila Coulson, Professor Coulson, told me was that when they were surveying the site, which has the densest concentration of rock art anywhere in the world, it's like thousands and thousands of rock art paintings, old Khoi San paintings, they had to be shown this particular site by a native Khoi San tribal leader. They didn't know about it. Okay, nobody besides the people who inhabit the area knew about this particular site, because the reason they were surveying the site was to get it registered as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So that's how they found this particular serpent cave, was through this actual survey. Anyway, I absolutely believe that when you're looking at this location, which is where Sodilo Hills is what is indicated here. And of course, this is prior to the scramble for Africa in the 1900s. So the lines of the countries are not there yet. But I'm very comfortable saying that I absolutely believe what is indicated here is the area of Sodilo Hills. What do you think, Scott?
Oh, look, I have absolutely no doubt that that's what that is.
Okay.
I just wonder what the red one is. It looks like
right. That's interesting. It's a basilisk. A basilisk is a type of dragon which has the head of a cockatrice and the claws of an eagle.
Right. Okay.
But it's got wings and a long serpent tail.
I just wonder if there aren't a couple more snake sculptures that haven't been discovered yet.
Very possibly. I actually think that Sodilo Hills has plenty more under the surface, because this looks like a pretty tall mountain to me. I think that there could be more beneath the surface. The same with Uluru. What you see is only the tip of the mountain. Okay, there's much more beneath the surface. Right. And the same thing that happened in Uluru happened here, which is there was a massive flood which came in and took out part of this, which is why we got the whole agricultural plains are no longer. Okay, there's a massive tsunami, the great flood that we read about in biblical literature. There's evidence for it here. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Let's get a little bit closer. Okay,
I just want to mention, I've actually got a fascinating DVD on cartography, which goes right into this sort of stuff. And the only Portuguese cartographers that I can think of from that time was Sebastian Munster. He actually used to draw maps of Africa back in the mid-1500s. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, I've got a copy of the Munster map of Africa as well. Yeah. But what you also find is that a lot of the maps were sometimes taken from older maps.
Yes,
and
they were.
Maps often kept within secret societies, because there was only a very few people back then who could read and write. Yeah. It was largely clergy, or if you were wealthy, you could be educated by the church. So it was mostly, for example, Prince Henry the Navigator was himself a very high-ranking, I think it was Knights Templar, Knights Templar. And they absolutely kept these maps in specific hands, and they are based on things which are passed down. Yeah. Interesting, the Piri Reis map, if anybody knows the Piri Reis map, shows the exact landscape of Antarctica without the ice sheet. I mean, where did they get that knowledge from? Yeah. That must be from a very old map. But there were definitely maps that were kept and passed down. and reconfigured and recompiled. And I'm thinking this is maybe not an area that was explored because it's extremely difficult and hard to get to. And if you don't know exactly where you're going, why would you go there? Because it just seems like you're going through endless desert if you're coming from the coast. Well, so this, I think, was passed down from a very old map.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
In the Middle Ages, maps were seen as dangerous by the leaders because they provided information that could be used by enemies. And that was one of the big reasons why they were so carefully controlled.
Yep, absolutely. Kept within very specific hands, normally the church or the various secret societies, which form other parts of work that I do. But I do want to just talk about the basilisk here, because the basilisk is interesting, okay? The basilisks are often a reference to gods, rulers, or royalty, as evidenced in various etymological deconstructions of the word and the word interplays. A basilisk is a supposed mythological serpent, supposedly the king of serpents, capable of killing with a deadly glance, and is sometimes depicted with the features of a cockatrice and sometimes depicted with a crown on their head. The cockatrice, in fact, has a bit of a plumage or a crown on its head. You know, it's pointy like that.
Right.
In ancient Greek, the word basileus, which is cognizant with the word basilisk, references a king or emperor. And if you think about other words such as basilica, okay, which is a type of Catholic church, a very specific type of Catholic church. It means that the Pope has visited that church. You do not get the title of basilica until it's been visited by the Pope, okay? Then it's just a cathedral and becomes a basilica when the Pope visits.
Right.
Interesting. So, as I said, the words basilisk, which is cognizant as well with the word obelisk. What do you find outside St. Peter's Cathedral in the Vatican? Is an obelisk.
I love obelisks, and I always think of that comic book series Asterix, where there was this guy, I've forgotten what it is, but he was huge, and he walked around with this obelisk in his hands as behind his back.
Actually, it was a menhir, Asterix and Obelix. It was a menhir. It wasn't an obelisk, but the obelisks are actually symbolic of the serpent. That's what they are. Basilisk and basileus, as we said, basileus is a Greek word for king or emperor. And these two words are etymologically cognizant with each other. And if you guys want to learn more about this, please do reference our book, Spellbreaker, page 46. It takes you much deeper into the symbolism of all of this. And I do want to just quickly point something out here. Notice how this serpent has a distinctive curl in its tail.
Yes.
Okay. A distinctive curl in its tail. I'm going to take you onto the next little bit. Right. This is known as a bichion. It's a type of serpent that represents the House of Visconti, and it's also the emblem of the city of Milan. And this very carving is also found on the Archduke's Palace in Vatican City. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you can see the serpent has a crown on its head. And
it's eating someone.
And it's eating someone. Yeah, look, this is like a baby. This is like a child, right? It's eating someone, distinctly. Now, they say, okay, when this is brought, when you bring this to, people in authority, they say, no, this is the serpent giving birth to humanity. But even if that is what the truth is of this symbol, that's interesting too, because the serpent deities are said to be created gods that created humanity in our current form. So I find it either way, whether they're eating or giving birth to humanity, I find it incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Now have a look at this. You see the curl and the crown and the person. This is the original Alfa Romeo logo. You see the same thing here, person coming out of the serpent's mouth. There's the curl and the tail and the crown. It's more difficult to work out what it is if you don't know symbolism, if you look at the modern logo, because this is a bit, it's more vague, it's more stylized. But clearly on the older Alfa Romeo logo, it's very clear as to what it is.
Absolutely.
And they've used the serpent with the curl, the person, and the crown, which you see here. It's very, very clear as to where it comes from. And of course, you've got the same serpents with the curl and the crown.
Mm.
Okay, back to here. Okay, so this is not the only symbolism you find of people coming out of serpent's mouth. In Mesoamerican mythology, there's a creator god known as Quetzalcoatl. and his temples and shrines are everywhere.
Is that the Inca?
That's the Aztec, as far as
Aztec.
I know. But this Aztec, Inca, Maya mythology all kind of move into each other because they all worship serpent deities. They come by different names in different in those different cultures, but ultimately the symbolism is always the same. It's always a serpentine icon. Again, notice a serpent with plumage, a crown, like a king.
Yeah.
Okay. The Romans.
I just want to make an observation at that, and that is that when we talk about the Bible, and it talks about Satan and the evil angels coming down to earth and mixing with people, and of course Satan is a serpent. There's some really interesting overlaps here, aren't there?
I get into that in great detail. And this is, I did have a nice chat to you before we started. And it's like, I really hope I don't offend your Christian community, because I actually am a big proponent of the Bible. I probably read the Bible more than most Christians do. Okay. Because everything I'm talking about, you can find evidence in the Bible.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. You just got to know what you're looking at.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Back to you.
This is, you find the symbolism turning up all over the world, interestingly enough, as we said, this serpent consuming human beings, because if you understand the urban nomenclature of this, you've ever followed the works of people like David Icke, he talks about how the dragons actually do eat people, like if you've understood any of that research. Yeah. So this is found evidenced in ancient cultures and in cultures all over the world. Now, I started going to what would be modern day temples, being churches, and I started looking to see if I could find symbolism. And true as well, I lived in Holland for almost 10 years. My husband is Dutch. And this is a Catholic church in Leiden. Leiden is the headquarters of the Bilderberg Group, if anybody understands who the Bilderberg Group is in terms of global conspiracy. So the Bilderberg Group is supposedly headquartered at Leiden University, and the church just opposite Leiden University is one that has a mural hidden in a corner. It's very hidden away. You really have to look for it. And I had to ask permission to take this photo, and the priest was none too happy about that. I think he knew that I was onto something. But have a look at this picture. It's got what could be UFOs or spaceships above it, with something coming out of the cloud there. But more specifically, this looks like Mother Mary with the sun and the moon. Which indicates pagan origins, pre-Christian origins of religion, and the astrotheological origins of religion. And I mean, my word, what an unusual thing to have in a church is this, under Mary with the tail wrapped around the tree. This is a dragon, clearly a dragon. There's no other way to look at it. That's what it is. And they turn up in all churches. You just got to look. You will find the symbol of the dragon in almost every church you go to. Maybe not the Protestant churches. The Protestant church broke away from the Catholic church, but definitely the older Catholic churches, you'll find these symbols hidden. There's a church in Zwali. It is a basilica. It is one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been into. Zwali means swollen because this church was put onto a hill, which was completely surrounded by water, and they put like in Holland, they canal the hell out of everything. Everything's got canals. It's a beautiful old medieval city, which is still walled. And in the middle, on the highest part of the city, is the basilica. Okay. And here's the tiles. These tiles go probably 3 meters into the air high. You can see that's pretty high up. I'm taking a photo looking up. Here's the under platform of this picture of Jesus, which has the IHS, which means Isis, Horus, Seth, referencing the Egyptian Holy Trinity. I beg your pardon. This references the Egyptian Holy Trinity, which shows that the origins of the Catholic Christianity is rooted far further back in ancient mystery religions than just being something that's come into effect in the last 2,000 years. Anyway, that's another story. You'll see over here, look at these tiles. It's hard to make out, but they are literally, the entire church has them 3 meters high from the floor, 3 meters high up. And if you get close up, and I took a photo of one of them, okay? And I literally mean the whole church is covered in it. This is what they are. They're little dragons, okay? Little dragons, okay, with wings and a long tail.
Yeah.
And again, what? These things on their head, like plumage, like a crown.
But they've got them at the Vatican too.
Yeah, there's loads of dragon symbolism in the Vatican.
Yeah, huge. But you
Huge.
know, then the Vatican has been recognized in recent times as being part of a very active part of the New World Order. You know,
Not in recent times. It's been the linchpin
yeah,
of the New World Order for
yeah,
thousands of years. Okay,
yeah,
and I'm not joking. For as long as the Catholic or Christianity has been around, it has been that linchpin. And in fact, the Sister KV trusts, which were set up as papal bulls by the Vatican in 1500s and 1600s, actually claim ownership over everything on earth, claim ownership over all our bodies, our vessels, and claim ownership over all our souls. So the Vatican believes they own everything, which is why they
well,
feel entitled to enforce this control and whatever other bullshit nonsense they're enforcing onto us.
they know what they can do with that bullshit idea. Anyway,
uh,
back to you.
exactly. Let me move on a bit here. So
Yeah,
this is a very controversial, and it might be a lot for people to swallow, but I always say to people, please don't believe me. There is nothing hidden that cannot be uncovered. There is nothing new under the sun. Go do your own research, think for yourself, and question everything you've been told. All the stuff is now coming into the mainstream. It's on television. The Ancient Alien series is very good. It's on the History Channel, and it explores a lot of the ideas that I have spoken about. I've been writing stuff for over a decade, and the series has only come about in the last few years or so. But I'm glad that it's coming about because it's bringing the stuff into a more mainstream acceptance. It's not just relegated to the realms of, the conspiracy nuts who are sort of got no life and so on. There are brilliant books and resources which you can read. In fact, a very good friend of mine, Eric Van Daniken, wrote a book called Chariots of the Gods in 1968. And he was doing some Bible studies and went to a Jesuit priest and asked the Jesuit priest, could this and this and this reference in the Bible actually be a spaceship from outer space? Was God an astronaut, an alien that came from outer space? And the Jesuit said yes. The Jesuit priest said, absolutely. This is the secrets that we keep in the Vatican. So it's known by the innermost, holiest circles. And if you've watched any of my documentaries or read my book, you understand how important the Jesuits are in terms of the global conspiracy. They control all other secret societies, every single one, from the Freemasons to the Knights of Malta to the Knights of St. John, absolutely everybody the Jesuits control. They control every military order across the world, and they control the global intelligence apparatus, whether it be Mossad or whether it be the CIA or British Secret Service. The Jesuits are at the very top.
yeah.
Okay, and they control it all.
I'm actually putting up a series of documentaries at the moment regarding that particular subject, and the overlap between the Catholic Church and the one world government concept is absolutely irrefutable. I mean, it's very clear.
It's very clear. And you know what's even scarier is when I've got a really good book here by a gentleman called Peter Lavender, and I interviewed him, I think it was back in 2011. Peter Lavender clearly states that the Vatican were absolutely behind the rise of the Nazi Party. And when the top Nazi scientists were evacuated from Europe under Project Paperclip and taken to America, because Werner von Braun was a Nazi and he was the one who started NASA, Nazi. Okay, they were evacuated because it was thought, if we don't get them, Russia will take them. So they took them and they put them into their. They started all the pharmaceutical industry. They started the Nazis started NASA and all that kind of thing. So when you take all of that into account, that the Vatican were the ones who smuggled the Nazis that were smuggled out under Project Paperclip. They smuggled them out on Vatican passports dressed as priests. That's how they got them out of Europe.
Wow.
The Vatican were absolutely behind the establishment of the Nazis, okay? And they were the ones who got the top Nazi scientists and leaders that were of value to America. They're the ones that got them out of Europe.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
The Anunnaki, just closing this off, is what we refer to often, and it's been a term that was coined by Zecharia Sitchin, who himself, I don't really want to say that I trust him completely because of his affiliation. He was also a Freemason and very controlling on the evidence. Zechariah Sitchin has clearly said to myself and David Icke, stay away from the dragons. Don't talk about the dragons. Just, they're the Anunnaki, the ancient aliens that came to Earth. They were the gods that we talk about in the Bible, but he won't go there he won't go anything serpentine. He just won't go there, which means he's a gatekeeper. He will allow certain information, but not others. But the word Anunnaki is interesting. Zechariah Sitchin wrote some very good books. You should check them out. Michael Tellinger has basically gotten all of his work from Zechariah Sitchin and a few other people. And the symbolism and etymology is very clear in the word Anunnaki, because the word Naki turns up in snake, nak, right, contains the root word. And this is where you start to see how these words have been put forward and what they're really referencing. For example, Anunnaki with the root word nak, naked, right? The word naked has the word nak in it, from snake and Anunnaki. And if you notice, all of these medieval, this is the Renaissance artwork. This is Julia Romano's Jupiter Seduces Olympia. You notice Jupiter is depicted with a serpentine lower half.
Right.
This is what we call dragon-footed or serpentipedis, when you have a human with a depiction of a human upper half and a snake lower half. There are dragon-footed or serpentipedis. Here again, the serpent in the Garden of Eden is depicted with a human upper half and a serpent lower part.
Right.
And look, they're all naked. Nudity in artwork, again, has a much deeper allegory, because you often wonder, why is there so much nudity in all this, artwork at a time when people are so repressed? And there's a reason for it. It too is symbolic of something much deeper. It's an allegorical symbol, which has much deeper meaning if you start to unpeel the layers, particularly the etymological root word layers, what I call serpentine etymology.
Right.
And just want to point you to one thing here. Look at these little pictures that Zechariah Sitchin uses here of these Anunnaki beings. And let's skip to here. You'll notice these two are almost identical. This one was found in Ecuador, part of a Catholic priest. It's his collection. Interesting, because they are the gatekeepers. And this is from Mesopotamia, opposite sides of the world. More than 2,000-year-old carvings in supposedly unconnected locations that are both over 2,000 years old. I mean, what are the chances? My belief is, if you have a look again where these places are. So Mesopotamia is here, Ecuador is here, and Africa is smack between them. You better believe that if they have these little serpent symbol gods appearing in, Mesopotamia and Ecuador, there's definitely something going on in Africa, because it's smack in between those two territories.
Absolutely.
And this is where I say there is incontrovertible evidence of a worldwide theophoric culture. As an independent investigative journalist, there are certain laws of discovery that journalists adhere to. Firstly, there's no such thing as coincidence. This is not coincidental that these two things are found in two different parts of the world looking almost identical. Look, even carrying what looks to be like an alien man bag or handbag and holding something, even the way it's poised. Again, look at the plumage, the crown, and with wings, okay? Dragons have wings. And also
even the lower part on the left leg sticking out of the tunic at the bottom.
And they're slightly different in stylization, but there's a lot of similarity to it, which means they were clearly depicting the same thing, clearly.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. And secondly, when there are such strong similarities between unconnected sources, this indicates this is more than mere myth or legend or fanciful tales. Rather, this is factual and truthful information, and it deserves serious consideration.
Well, the other thing, of course, Mel, is all the pyramids all over the blimmin' place. It's not just in Egypt.
They are everywhere, and that's a very important point. There's a reason for that. Those pyramids have a much deeper allegory, there's never been a single pharaoh found under the three main pyramids in Giza, because it wasn't a tomb. It's much older than people might want to acknowledge. There are also gatekeepers of information there. Professor Hawass, for example, he doesn't like to admit that the pyramids are anything older than 5,000 years. And Yeah, I mean, if you want to believe that, they laid multi-ton blocks every 2 seconds because there's over 2.5 million blocks there, and supposedly it took 20 years to build. You want to believe that they could load multi-ton blocks every 2 seconds? Yeah, sure. Got a nice piece of land I'd like to sell you on the coast. It's just,
It's
it doesn't make
crazy.
sense. It's crazy. I grew up in the building industry. My
Yeah.
mom was a property developer, and my father worked in the building industry. And I understand the process of building, and that you cannot lay multi-ton blocks with that precision, perfectly aligned to north, east, south, and west.
But
Every
Mel,
2 seconds.
it goes much further than that. There were actual tunnels which went to the surface, which had that they were perfectly aligned and went down about 20 meters, and they were cut into these solid rocks that were placed together. So they must have been pre-carved and then put in absolutely perfect unison. The technology behind those pyramids is absolutely unexplainable. There's no way you can explain it.
It is explainable quite simply that we are not the most advanced culture that has ever lived on this planet.
Well,
I believe
I mean,
that
from the logic that they tell you at the moment, it's unexplainable. I hear what
it's
you're saying.
unexplainable.
Yeah.
It is from that point of view. You look at it. I mean, you got to be stupid if you believe that the official narrative. Really, just do a bit of maths and it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to finish this off because we're coming to the end, and
Sure.
I want to talk about the importance of ritual mythology in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
And then we'll get some questions. Comprehending the importance of ritual should not be underestimated. In mainstream academia and anthropology, it's the appearance of ritual behavior which marks the move from what we modern day society would call primitive people to supposedly civilized complex societies consisting of laws and infrastructure, institutions, temples of worship, and developed communication systems, including writing and art. This is, of course, significant when one takes into consideration that Sedilo Hills is the world's largest concentration and collection of rock art. Another interesting fact to take into account is that Sedilo Hills is the only hills and mountainous rocky outcrops for over 100 miles in any direction. The terrain surrounding Sedilo Hills is completely flat, making these hills a focal point on the landscape, hence the reason why it would be a likely gathering place for ritual.
Right.
And Khoi San mythology states that these are the mountains of the gods, or the rocks that whisper. And the local Khoi San mythology links Sedilo Hills all the way back to the creation mythology. Again, more creational mythology, which tells the story of how mankind descended from the serpent. Even more interesting is that the creational mythology includes details about how this creator god, in the form of a serpent, also created the now arid stream beds around the hills. Okay?
Yeah.
For those, I mean, if you had to listen to Khoi San mythology and they said, oh, there used to be stream beds around these hills, you go, but it's a desert. How could that be? But when you get above, you can see them.
Yeah.
Right? So for those who may know my dragonology body of work, you'll be familiar with my stance that myths are not childish stories or pre-scientific explanations of the world. Rather, they are serious insights into reality. Myths exist in all societies as they are part of the very fabric of human life, as they express beliefs held by those societies. Myths explain behaviors of past societies, giving us an insight into the customs and values. But most importantly, mythology gives us a clue as to the origins of humanity, the story of which does not differ that much from one culture to the next. In fact, most cultures, including the Australian Aboriginals, Nordic, Chinese, Egyptian, Hindi, but to name a few, have some sort of creational mythology involving a created deity taking the form of a serpent or a dragon. It is common practice that the word myth is used in the context intending to indicate a foolish story or a false idea. And this could not be further from the truth, for it is the things which people deem important that find place in their mythology.
You know, we had this discussion before we actually went live, Mel, regarding myths. And I made the point that what I find quite extraordinary is that if you look at, for example, the Zulu myths or the Khoi San myths, these stories have been told over thousands of years. And unlike
right.
where you think of us today, where you get three people in a line telling a simple story, by the time you get to the third person, the whole context has changed because we put our own spin on it. But these myths have not changed over thousands of years. They haven't had places to write them down. It's all been told by stories. It's quite extraordinary.
Absolutely. And there's so much more to illustrate these points. I mean, the same themes keep coming in again and again. And I've demonstrated that throughout the bodies of work that I've already published. And I've got one that focuses specifically on Africa. It's called Theophis, after the land of the dragon gods and the cultures that worship them, after Theophic culture. Africa, I call it Theophis. That is the name I've given to this ancient lost chapter that we will be exploring through my next upcoming presentations, which I'm looking forward to being able to share with everybody here.
Fabulous.
But, in the meantime, if anybody's interested in checking out any of my work, I've got numerous places. Just go to my website, melve.life, scroll through, and you'll see all the various projects and bits and pieces I'm involved in. And everyone who's been listening, thank you for your time and attention. It's always an honor to be able to present this information to a South African-based audience. Grateful to anybody who takes an interest. Please feel free to contact me if you have any pictures or things that you found which might be of interest or add to the richness of this information.
Right. Well, I actually sent you a short video that I took a few years ago. That was at a place called Ratelgat, which is a few hours north of Cape Town. And it's actually a sacred place for the Griqua people. And it's sort of in a very dry area. But in this old river bed, there were these rocks, and you've seen the video, with these carvings in them, intricate little carvings, which they have no idea who did them, what the history is, but they are so weather-worn, they must be thousands of years old. And that's just north of Cape Town. Now, I've got a bunch of questions here for you that have come up during the
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So Clive asks, why are most countries in Africa third world countries if they were so advanced?
It's a very good question. My belief is Africa, I actually get emotional because I am South African, and it hurts my heart that South Africa is, and Africa is in the state that it's in, because it doesn't have to be this way. If you look at how advanced we have been in past iterations of civilization, there's no reason we couldn't be like that again. The reason we're not is because Africa has been so ripped apart by meddling, colonialization. I mean, even as a white South African, I still have a South African passport and I do not have dual nationality. I'm still a South African citizen. I am devoted as a South African. I will never give up my citizenship. I feel robbed of my heritage because even though I'm white, I feel it's not only the black people that have been robbed and had their history scrubbed from them and they've been made to look like they were nothing but semi-dismissive, tribal, primitive people, because I can prove that that's not true based on my work.
Right.
Okay. And I also feel that I have been robbed of this heritage, this amazingness that Africa once was. And we can be that again. The thing is, Africa doesn't need anybody else. But we are so resource rich that the powers that be want to keep us in a state of servitude and slavery so that they can help themselves to the resources. And it is the resources of Africa which power the New World Order.
Yeah. Well, I think from that aspect, the way I see it is that you've got two cultures which were so different. It's like trying to mix oil and water. It doesn't work. And you have the traditional African culture, and then you have this advanced colonial culture where everything is driven by money, whereas in the traditional African culture, they had a totally different focus. And I think that's where the cultural aspect has been a huge problem in the evolution in the last 100, 200 years in South Africa. Now, Myra Page says, who were the first people of South Africa? Well, I know that answer, but I'll give it to you.
The first people. The Khoi, the San, they say that were the originals. When you talk about the First Nations, okay?
Yeah.
technically the Khoi or the San or the Khoi San, if you want to call it that, would be what I would refer to as the first people. But that even that word is a modern attribution. It's like the word Hottentot was a European term to describe these people. So to say it's this or that people, it's really just labels that we've relegated to them. Who knows what the previous iterations of civilization looked like? Because if you go to ancient, to South America, Mesoamerica, you find statues of the Olmec civilization, which is predates even the Aztecs. And these Olmec heads, these massive heads, are clearly African, like the big lips, the flat nose. They are African.
Yes, I've seen those.
Okay. So it's very difficult to say what peoples, were they like the Asian-looking people, the Polynesian-looking people, were they the white people, were they the black people? I don't really know what race or color or definition per se were the original peoples. All I know is that they were a highly advanced race, potentially dark-skinned people who lived and thrived and were very advanced and had technology, incredible technology to build those canals, and that to terraform that landscape would have taken an incredible amount of manpower and technology.
Right. And just for the record, the original name for the Khoi is actually Khoi Khoi, which stands for
Khoi.
Men of Men. Now, okay, Michael Lawson says, why do they apply that ritual to CERN? And this is when we were talking about the Commonwealth Games. I don't know if you've seen that ritual with CERN where they were drawing them up into this portal to another dimension at the launch of one of their tunnels. Why would they have had that ritual then?
Well, if you know anything about the New World Order, you know it's distinctly satanic. My belief is that they're trying to break open a gateway to hell.
Yeah,
that's what I've come to understand. Is so what is CERN? I mean, really, who wants to spend billions and billions smashing particles together? Really, a collider that smashes particles together. What are they trying to do? They're trying to rip a fabric into our dimensionality. Like they're trying to open up a portal into something. And of course, I'm thinking this is like a portal to hell, or they're trying to summon greater forces. Because they're all worship. The New World Order is distinctly satanic in nature. Okay, it's very it's dark.
We've only just scratched the surface of their evil when we look at people like Epstein and his ilk. Okay,
let me tell you, I've interviewed people all over the world, and I could tell you what they do, but it tears me apart.
Yeah, look, it's shocking. Think of adrenochrome. You've heard of adrenochrome?
Yes, of course, I know all about that.
Yeah. Now, Winston says, I wonder how herbal drugs contributed to our connection. For example, African dream root. Also, there's dance and rhythm. Also, many other herbal concoctions. And just on that point, Mel, before you answer, I watched some really interesting videos about how the San, when they did their paintings, they were often done in a trance-like state. And you can actually see that with the various ways that the rock paintings are actually done. It's a very, very interesting and little understood area. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, yes, I'm all for psychedelic experiences. I encourage people to expand their consciousness with things like ayahuasca, DMT, lysergic acid diethylamide, magic mushroom, psilocybin. Do yourself a favor, go ahead, give it a bash and connect, because it's all there. I get why they do this rock paintings, because it does take you into another level of consciousness where you can potentially connect. In fact, a very good friend of mine, his name's eluded me now. It'll come to me. He actually took ayahuasca, and he went into another reality where he actually saw these dragon, reptilian, serpentine beings. And he's not a proponent of the dragon and serpentine deity theory. He was having conversations with them under the influence. He wrote a book, Fingerprints of the Gods. I read it when I was the very first book I ever read that opened me up. Graham Hancock.
Right.
It's the very first book I ever read. I got it from a secondhand bookstore when I was just finished high school and my tertiary education. And it had just come out the year before. And it was the first book that opened me up to the idea that there are ancient advanced civilizations that predate anything that's currently accepted by mainstream academia. And funny enough, Graham Hancock has himself also done the whole ayahuasca journey. I myself have done many ayahuasca circles with many different shamans. I've explored alternate realities and interdimensionalities and things like that. So I get the reason why they do this stuff. And I get the reason why these concoctions are largely part of ritual ceremonies, because it's not like you want to be taking this stuff every day. You want to save it for a specifically controlled, specific time, specific place, specific reason. It is a ritual thing that you do it with. And even when we do the ayahuasca circles, there's rituals and there's prayers and there's singing and there's drumming and there's all sorts that goes with it. It's very ritualistic in nature. And these herbal remedies and roots and psychoactive potions have been used for thousands of years, supposedly for people to connect with the spirits and the ancestors and that sort of thing. Funny enough, the late, great Credo Mutwa, who I've had the great pleasure of meeting and working with several times, and I've interviewed him, his works are on my network. He said that the vaccine programs that came out, and I interviewed Credo Mutwa back in 2010.
Right.
Okay, that's before this whole round of vaccines now.
Yeah.
He clearly stated that when the young children went to the supply stores to get their vaccinations, they lost their spiritual eyes and their ability to connect with the ancestors and the spirits. So why do you think they give us these vaccinations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to be careful what we say there, because YouTube is feral.
Yeah, no, I know. This is kind of what it does. It really does cut you off from your connection.
Absolutely, absolutely. I get that. Now, Cindy says, what affected the Great Flood? And this is a really interesting question. What effect did the Great Flood in the Bible have in creating these geographical significance of the landscape? Now, you talk about a great flood in Africa, and I had a fellow on a live stream a couple of weeks ago who actually identified the original Ark, which is in southern Turkey, and it's on a hill 6,000 feet above sea level.
Mount Ararat, isn't that?
Mount Arafat, yes.
Arafat, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, that, and in southern Turkey, and it's over 6,000 feet above sea level. And it's that the actual dimensions fit perfectly with the biblical description. It is quite extraordinary.
Well, that's a very good question, because if you've watched my book, my documentary, Secrets of the Kalahari, I get into this in quite great detail. I believe that there was a massive flood which came out of the North Atlantic at a downward angle towards Africa. It created what is now the Sahara Desert. In fact, they have found whale bones in the Sahara Desert, okay, as an example of how this is a reality. It took out the west coast of Africa. If you look on the west coast of southern Africa, Namibia, it's nothing there. It's called the Skeleton Coast for a reason. Yeah. If you look at Swakopmund, there's Swakopmund on the coast, and then there's nothing behind it but sand.
Yeah.
And the west coast of Africa, and it's the same thing. This tsunami came around the tip of Africa and also hit Australia, because if you look at Australia, the same topography exists there. The most habitable part of Australia is the west coast, because it's green there. The
East Coast.
It's the East Coast. Yeah. It's all green there. The West Coast is desert. Three-quarters of Australia is desert because it was hit by a tsunami. Okay. The deserts were created by tsunamis. And when you start to look at the geographics of it, please do check out my documentary, Secrets of the Kalahari. You will see exactly how this has happened. And if you look at the topography of Africa, you'll notice that, where I grew up, which is Mshanga Rocks on the East Coast in Durban, there it's all green. The topography of Africa, it's green, but the West Coast is brown. There's definitely something that's happened that the West Coast is so brown compared to the East Coast.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, apparently the Kalahari Desert, well, as we've been talking about, used to be very fertile with lots of plants and everything on it. Now, Johan Steenkamp has said, please ask Mel if there is any, or if there are any clues about how the Khoi San survived the flood.
My guess is that they climbed to the top of the mountains, okay, Cedillo Hills. The ones that were, able to climb, were able to get there, obviously were able to get to the top of the mountain. That's what I believe. That's where I think some of them probably took shelter, because there's lots of rock shelters and depressions. You can see from the fact that there's so many rock arts in different caves and things there. And as I've already said, the part of Cedillo Hills that we see is only a very little bit of what I believe was once exposed. I believe it was a much higher mountain range, okay? And that the reason why these stream beds, these now arid stream beds, were in fact destroyed was because a massive tsunami came and obviously brought all the silt in, which covered them up. But because there's different geographical things going on under the ground, you can see there's definitely different ways in which the plant grows and which the soil falls.
Right.
And I think that the land where it is probably a lot higher than it once was.
Right. Now, Cindy says, can Mel tell us a bit more about the Khoi San rock art? Because, as you say, that area is one of the richest places when it comes to rock art paintings.
Indeed. It's the most concentrated collection of rock art in the world, which is significant because the art of writing and arts itself was supposedly given to us by the gods. In fact, in ancient Egyptian mythology, the god Thoth, who also became known as Hermes Trismegistus, gave us the arts of writing and gave us the first sort of like hieroglyphics in terms of writing and stuff like that. So the actual act of making a mark is a ritual itself. The act of writing, look at the word write, it has the word R-I-T from ritual. It is in fact a ritual, okay? Writing is done for a specific purpose. Okay, it's to mark specific symbolic things that you want to communicate. And that is what rock art is. Right. They are trying to communicate. This is not just random things. For example, some tribes, forgive me, I might not have it down correctly. Some tribes in Africa, when they become men, they go and they put handprints on the walls and stuff. Okay.
You can see them at Rattlecut.
I think I saw that already. That's, again, a rite of passage. When you become a man, that's a rite of passage. You mark it with a marking, a ritual marking. All artwork is done for a specific purpose. It's to either mark a ritual or record something of significance. They don't go to all the effort of collecting the paint, making it, because it's not like you can buy a tube of paint from your art shop. It's like they have to go to a lot of effort.
If I can put it this way, Mel, it's like when you go to university and you spend 4 years studying and you come out the other end and you get this piece of paper which you hang on the wall because, that's your confirmation that you passed this particular subject. And when I was at Rattlecut, the guy who was showing me around, he said that the handprints that you could see were the San who had actually shot their first eland, with poisoned arrows, and once they'd done that, then that was a man. They were now a man, so they can now put their print on the wall.
Interesting, because there's several symbolic allegories there. First off, the rite of passage, the becoming of fertility of a man, virile, the sacrifice of an animal. There's all ritual elements, and then the marking of the sacrifice of the artwork. All of this ties in.
Exactly. All right, I have one final question for you, then we're going to wrap up. We've been going for 2 hours and it's been absolutely fascinating. I can tell you, people in the side saying, wow, Mel really knows her subject. Well, she's probably the world authority on this subject. Now, Tokolosh says, please ask your guest about the Phoenician galleys found in Cape Town.
Phoenician galleys, not my subject, I'll be honest.
Okay, we'll let that one go through to the keeper. Mel, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I do look forward to having you on again to discuss similar subjects, because this is an area that is so misunderstood, isn't it?
It is misunderstood, and it's misinterpreted, and it's hidden, because The reality is that the powers that be don't want us to know the truth about the true nature of the controlling forces that rule our planet and what they are and how they operate, because they do some pretty awful things. They would have us believe that we are the top of the food chain. We are not. Okay, I won't get into that today. We'll talk about that another time. They would have us believe that if you go to church and you're a good person and you do certain things, that you're going to be rewarded in certain ways. And what you don't understand is that at certain times, certain of the things that we do are actually rituals which are giving what I call dragon food to these dark entities. For example, ball sport. Being an audience in an arena of ball sport, you are watching a ritual, and your participation as an audience member is a participation in that ritual. That is a dragon ritual. All ball sport is dragon ritual. Again, this is available in my book, Spellbreaker. It's the same thing with theater. I studied speech and drama since I was 7 years old. Every year I did speech and drama at school, and every year we start with theater history, and they tell you the same thing. Theater began with ritual. Okay, that's how theater started. This mainstream education tells you this. So it's not that we've just made this up. We are taught this over and over again every year when we do speech and drama at school. Through every year of high school, I learned the same thing. So ritual as well. Theater with the word THE, theater, thespian, THE. It's the root word that I spoke about earlier. Important to notice, because it's inferring to something that is done in honor of a god. Okay. And theater, even if you're in the audience, you're a participant in the ritual, and you're giving your energy to a focal point, which ultimately, what I say is, the way where attention goes, energy flows, and energy is a real thing. What are you giving your energy to? I believe the most important thing you can give someone is your attention. That's why you pay attention. It's the most valuable thing you can give. So that energy is going towards something. What is the ultimate transformation of that energy? What is it ultimately serving? Every single part of every single aspect of our culture comes down to ritual. Everything we do is a ritual. And most of that ritual comes from dragon worship, ophiolatry. And that's the truth. You're welcome to check it all out in my book, Spellbreaker. If you guys can't afford it, please let me know. I'll send you an ebook copy. I don't do this for money. I'm happy to share the knowledge. I'm just happy that people are interested.
At the very start, I said that we'd love to have your stuff on our forum. And maybe if you sent me a PDF, we could actually make it available through a link on the forum that people could then download it and have a look.
Okay, well, let's chat, and I'd love to come back and share some more with you, because this is such a vast spectrum of information that what I've presented today is only like a fraction. It's probably not even 1% of everything that I have to show you.
Okay, fantastic. Mel, thank you so much, and look, have a great evening, and it's been fabulous talking to you. I've been looking forward to this day, because we're both historians, we're both researchers, and it's lovely sort of discussing things that you understand and I understand, and it's just great to unpack that. Take care and have a great evening.
Thank you for having me. Cheers, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
All right, guys, that was Mel V, and what a fascinating discussion. I just love history, and I love going into the real early part of humanity and where the origins are. And it's a fascinating subject you can never get bored of. I just want to thank the moderators for keeping an eye on the side chat. We had a good crowd tonight, and thank you for your questions. And I'm going to wrap this up now with our second theme song, which is Op ons Rots. And that, of course, is by Anton Thomas. And here it goes. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time.
Recording stop.
Ons
loop hand aan hand op goue warm sand. So baie wat ek wil hee, so baie dit brand. Ek staan op my rots, met golwe wat bots. Ons het geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze manne. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Die winde waai sterk, dis kragte wat werk. Die gevoel in my hart, dis vrees wat wil brand. Ons is boere met trots, met my hand in my bors. Ons ken geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze manne. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien wat gebeur, die leuen sal ons nie steur. Kom slaan nog 'n keer, ek is stil, want ek weet hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze manne. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze manne. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Ja, hy is in beheer.